Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rookie Pastors Podcast. Casual conversations by real pastors about real ministry. My name is Kyle Neiman, our host for this week, and I'm joined by Josh Prince and Bryan Colley. Guys, how are we doing today?
Good.
Wonderful.
Oh, love it. Love to hear it. Very, very positive. That's good. See that, Josh, you and I are both sporting the rope hat.
Yeah.
There we go. So
Yeah,
rocking and rolling there.
If I fall, I can climb out.
Safety. Safety first. That's what it's all about.
Built-in survival skills.
Hey, one of the things you guys know about me, because you've both asked me for about this, is y'all know that I love burgers. Probably too much. I love cheeseburgers. My favorite food in the world. And you've both asked me for burger recommendations in the past, and I feel like I've delivered. Okay, Bryan has always goes with like third choice that I give him, and that's his own fault.
No, that's not my fault. That's my family's fault.
Hey, blame whoever you want. I'm going to blame you. No, but I'm curious. Your ideal burger. What is on it? Like, what are the toppings on your ideal burger? And so I'll go first. I feel like you need an onion element, cheese element, and a spicy element. Those are my three things that I want on every burger. There's a place on TCU's campus, off Berry Street in Fort Worth, called Dutch's. They have great burgers. And one of the things they have on their chili cheeseburger is a jalapeno relish. So I would have a jalapeno relish with grilled onions and just American cheese, preferably on a smash burger, but really you can't go wrong with any type of burger with all that on it. So that would be mine. I'd like to hear from you guys, your ideal burger toppings.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you. First off, I would prefer a smash burger. That is my preference.
Well done.
I've talked about it before. We have some church members who own a barbecue joint, and their burger is probably my favorite burger. So Kyle, you got to come over here.
Dude,
sometimes smash burger.
I could make it there for a late lunch.
Coming today. But very similar. So I don't like raw onions. I only like grilled onions. So it's grilled onions. It's a jalapeno relish, cheddar cheese, and they add the bacon. So really good. That's my favorite. I go anywhere if they do grilled onions, and especially if they do grilled jalapenos, I want it on the burger. I want my breath to remind me the rest of the day that I enjoyed an incredible burger.
In all seriousness, I have very little scheduled in my lunch hours next week, and so I'm driving to Cedar Hill. That's just going to happen. Yeah, I'm going to check with you. You tell me which day you have open for lunch, and I'll make the drive over there. Bryan, what about you?
So I'm opposite. I like a nice, thick,
I thought he was going to say a veggie burger.
No.
Okay.
He wants a black bean patty.
Burger. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Bacon and cheese. Absolutely. I like raw onions. I love the crunch of a raw onion on a burger. Occasionally lettuce. It just depends on my mood. Yellow mustard all the way.
Okay.
And sometimes tomatoes, but I've really gotten away from the tomato on the burger. It just makes it a little too soggy. And then, just to throw a little craziness, depending on where I'm at. So if I'm at Brahms, and if you don't live in North Texas or in Oklahoma, you probably don't know what Brahms is. You have to put the French fries on the burger. And
I've never done that at Brahms.
Well,
so
there's a new thing for you to do. It just it changes everything.
God,
I don't like treacle cut fries.
This week.
Oh yeah, nothing.
Oh, man.
So yeah.
Oh, okay, good. The whole point of the Rookie Pastors podcast up to this point has been for me to ask this question. I've just been building up to this, and I'm done after this. It was to build a platform to speak out against tomatoes on burgers. That's the whole point. Yeah. Tomatoes on burgers is one of the worst things that anybody's ever done. People have tried to fight me on it, and I refuse to be wrong. If you want a soggy, wet burger, then go for it. Enjoy your mush.
If you want tomato on your burger, just put ketchup on there. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I like tomatoes, just not on my burger anymore.
Doesn't belong in a burger. It ruins it. Well, that's good to know. You guys, that's
Dustin,
solid.
Dustin would be a tomato guy.
I bet he is. Don't you think Dustin's a tomato guy?
I bet he eats it in a lettuce wrap. I bet he doesn't.
Oh yeah.
Buns.
When you're that close to Austin, that's all they have. That's all they have is lettuce wraps.
They don't eat burgers. They just eat tacos in Austin. That's all they eat.
Actually, there's a Mighty Fine Burger that's out there in Austin, and they have one right pretty close to his church, I believe.
Yeah.
That's in Georgetown, but yeah, I love Mighty Fine. It's a lot like Kincaid's here in Fort Worth, but just a little bit more refined. I do love some Kincaid's. I can talk about burgers all day. Let's start a burger podcast, but we'll plan that after we have this episode. This week we're talking about, guys, I gotta be honest with you. When I realized that I was hosting this episode, I'm like, well, this is awful because I struggle with this so bad. And so it's probably just the Holy Spirit, divining things. So I have to confront this.
That's why you get to ask the questions.
Exactly.
You don't have to answer as much. Yeah.
I get to ask the questions. I'm not a person to answer it, but we're talking about delegation. And delegation being, handing off the work to other people, and how we do that as pastors, and why it's important to do that as pastors. I have a really quick story to launch us off here. When I was in student ministry, my first church, I was the associate student pastor, and just cutting my teeth in ministry. And I was put in charge of this really massive event. It was like 300 kids, 500 parents watching. It was a big, massive flag football tournament that we did. And so I was in charge of coming up with the rules for it, getting the flags, getting the referees lined up. We had volunteer referees. We had, I think it was like 12 different fields going at once, getting the bracket and whatnot. And I decked myself out in this all white outfit. It just like the soccer kit that was all white and white shoes. I thought it was real slick. I was just being funny and goofy with it. But that whole event, I was running all over the place. And the problem was that week I had been trying some long distance running, and I dislocated a bone in my foot. Mm-hmm. And I was in horrible pain, like everywhere, running all over the place. And my father-in-law, my future father-in-law, comes up to me. He's like, "What can I do to help you?" I'm like, I don't know. And I just run off. And like, he did it like 6 times. "What can I do to help you?" And I like broke down, and I'm like, I don't know how to ask for help. And he's like, then tell me the things you're trying to do, and I'll take some of it. And I was like, oh, okay, these are the things. And he just starts doing some of those things for me. It was that moment that I'm like, I really realized I am horrible at delegation. And it has been a fight for me in ministry. And what I notice is when I am most spiritually weak, I am lowest in delegation. But when I am doing well spiritually, I am joyful in handing things off. And so I tell you that story to kind of tell you where my headspace is with this. It's something I'm passionate about getting better at. So I'd love to hear from y'all. So like me, I would like to hear from y'all. What are the risks of trying to handle everything on your own as a pastor? What are some of the risks we face?
I think that the easiest answer, because it's the right answer, is burnout. Right.
Yeah,
like
that's what I was
you're going to burn yourself out. Yeah. I think that, and not easy, meaning, that's a waste of an answer. Like that is the most obvious reality to it. I think though, what I've seen is arrogance is the biggest pressure that comes from trying to do it all, because when things go well, man, if things go bad, that's where the burnout probably takes place. Probably quicker than anything else. But I think when everything's going well and you're the one that's orchestrating it, arrogance.
It's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of pride wrapped into that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think on the flip side, with that is it really hurts your church. One, because you're getting burned out. You're not leading well because you're leading from a prideful standpoint. But now people aren't doing what God has gifted them in,
Yeah, that's
and
it.
um, they are so the church is hurting because eventually they're like, well, he has to have his hand in everything, or he's going to be doing everything, or he's going to be at everything. So why do I need to even offer or consider it? And so,
Yeah.
you've got your personal risk, but that's a real risk to the health of the church there. And it's
Well,
hard. I'm like you, Kyle. I'm a horrible delegator.
And we're going to get into that later in the episode, like the church involvement part of it.
Yeah.
So let me speak to something that is a reality, and it's I'm not pushing this out. I'm not in a transition time. I'm not leaving the church, but there could come a time, there will come a time where you're no longer the pastor of that church. Like whether death or opportunity, whatever it is.
right.
But so what is the church able to keep doing when you're not there anymore? Like, because
Absolutely.
I came into a church where there wasn't a lot of delegation, and so people were doing things and they didn't know why they were doing them. They didn't know the purpose, or they were just doing things and they were functioning in a space that they didn't actually want to be in, but they just did it because they didn't know where else to go and they saw a need there. So they did it. So I think that you have to think in regards to the long-term aspect of the church. Is this church going to be sustainable and healthy when, for whatever reason, I'm not calling the shots, whenever I'm not the pastor here anymore? Are you setting it up for failure by making it so dependent on you?
Yeah, I think we also risk compromising our um, pastoral credibility to our church. Like, how can we effectively preach the body of Christ and the giftedness of the body of Christ? Get up there from the pulpit and preach those passages, and then say, "But I'm going to do it all." It hurts our credibility to preach the word as well. So, as a pastor, so how do we identify um, what tasks to delegate and what to keep under us, though? Like, how do we weigh those different things out? Josh, what do you think?
Well, I mean, from the get go, I'm always going to say the things that I know I am not gifted at. Okay. So I don't have a financial bone in my body. I wasn't taught those types of things. I was never in any position I had other than overseeing my own budget line, which is not uncommon. I get, but I don't know how that stuff works. I don't speak finances, and I'm blessed that came into a church that had some strong financial people. God has brought another man into our church over the last couple of years who really, he sees things in a little different way that's going to be healthy for the church while still maintaining what we already had in place. So my answer to is, first and foremost, it's what do you know you're not good at? And don't give it away and be like, well, I don't need to learn anything about it, right? You need to become efficient, but there's obviously certain things that are not up your alley, and so you need to find the wiser, more capable, the gifted person who can oversee that thing. And then obviously you need to be bringing up people who are just really strongly gifted, especially if it's your staff. Like if you have the blessing of a staff, then make sure that you're constantly encouraging them forward. I think I do that. I know I don't do it as consistently as I should, but I'm constantly like just trying to say, hey, listen, that's yours. Like take the lead, have ownership, have joy in what you're doing.
Right.
I feel like that's a big measure that I try and push on our staff. That's really good. And so then the other side of it is, well, what are the things that first I have to do? Like, what is my job description saying I need to do? So obviously those are things that are expected of me. Obviously preaching the word is substantial to the hours that I put in during the week. But then what are the other things that I really enjoy? We've talked about before, like kind of some of the things that we do to kind of unwind in a way that are part of our job. And for me, that's graphic design. So I like to do that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's overwhelming because there are a lot of things that need to get done, but I'm passionate about it. I do pretty well at a lot of this stuff. And so it's worth, just some time that I might have every couple weeks to, invest in that. And so it's not in my job description, but because I enjoy it, because I can make time for it from time to time, why not indulge in it?
Bryan, what do you think?
Yeah. I think Josh, it's dangerous when you're saying the job description, because you look at churches' job descriptions for their pastors, and they have to do everything in that job description, and be an expert at everything, and what your job is to get the people to understand you are there, as Paul writes in Ephesians, to equip the saints, to do the ministry of the word. And I look at Scripture, and you go back to the role of the apostles when in Acts chapter 6, so they could focus on the preaching and teaching of the word and ministry of prayer. That is, that's our main priority. That doesn't necessarily mean your Sunday sermon is the only thing you do. You are in charge of the overall. You might be blessed and have a discipleship pastor or a youth minister that focuses on youth discipleship, but your job is to disciple the people, and through that ministry. So you've got to focus on the spiritual health of the church, and and anything that might not fall under that, feel free to delegate that. But like you, but I know both of you guys do graphic design. I love graphic design. I love and I can knock stuff out in about 10, 15 minutes, and for me, that keeps my mind creative. It keeps the juices flowing, and that helps me in my preaching. Going out and having lunch with someone or coffee with someone, and that's a discipleship moment. That's the ministry aspect of it. But you can delegate some of that as well, because that's how you equip the saints. And so there's a balance there, because people already think the pastors only work one day a week, because they don't understand and can't quantify what ministry is. Like if you were to sit down and write out a time log of what you did ministry this week, I bet you might think, oh, I was in the office for 40 hours, but you did ministry for like 70. If you really were to chart it out, that's not sustainable. And so you've got to find those things. Maybe you can only touch base with this group of people once a month, and they need more than that. Find somebody that can be that person. One of the bring on lay ministers that take on a certain thing. If you still do bulletins, don't be the one that does the bulletin. Have somebody put together your newsletter. All that kind of stuff. And really, I find it funny that you look at job descriptions, and it's the pastor is an ex officio member of every committee in the church. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so now I'm in a building and grounds committee meeting, and they need, the filters on the water fountains changed, but they don't have time to do it. So guess who's doing it? And it just falls back. So you've got to be pretty firm in some things and say no. And in other things say, let's do this together. And in other things say, you know what, that really falls under what I feel like the church needs from me spiritually at this moment. So I'll do that.
Yeah, you touched on something really good there about talking about committees or whatever the polity in your church looks like. You know that well by the written bylaws, but also know it well by how it's actually practically working mm-hmm. in the church. That those are often two different things.
Yeah.
But I had a conflict with a church member recently who was serving on a committee, and we as a staff went ahead and did something that was under their jurisdiction. It was their job, and we did it because that committee hadn't done that in the past. And so rather than us as a staff saying to that committee, hey guys, this is on you. Hey, can y'all take care of this? We just went ahead and did it. And that's what we had been doing for months and months and months, stuff like that. But this new committee member said, hey, why are you taking our job? Why am I even serving on this committee if you're just going to do the work for me? And I had to go, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. You need to do this. And so the next time something came around, I just said, hey, it's yours. And a staff member saying, hey, do we need to take care of this? Like, no, we don't. They'll do it. And they did. We gave them the opportunity. Now, that's one of the things that I think in our arrogance and in our foolishness, we look at it about delegation. We think that delegation is our hands are off, we're not involved anymore. It doesn't have to be. We're still shepherding. We're still involved in the process. But here's what I think, and I am preaching to myself with this, and this is going to hurt for me to say. I think one of the biggest reasons that I don't hand off stuff enough is because it takes more time.
Yep.
Or it's not going to be done the way that you think it should be done.
Exactly. I had a pastor friend of mine. He was executive pastor at my previous church. He said, if somebody can do it 80% as well as you, let them do it. And I would always snark back. I'm like, what if your idea of 80% is my idea of 60%? He's like, then let them do it at 60%. And I've always wrestled with that because there's a perfectionist side with me, going back to what you said, Josh, that excellence, that arrogance that sometimes comes with that. Perfectionist thing that we can get ourselves into. I wrestle with it because I'm like, I don't want it done 80% as well. I want it done at 100%. And I have to recognize that I can keep doing that. I can burn out and I can discourage somebody else. And ultimately I leave the church worse off because I was pursuing 100%.
I remember hearing something I was at years ago talking about your strengths and weaknesses. Cause you everybody wants to know what are you strong in? What are you weak in? And get, you work to get your weaknesses better, and this take was, don't do that. You're strong in these areas. Focus on those areas and find people that are strong in the areas you're weak in and bring them alongside you. Easier said than done. Right. But I think there's also this idea that, when we delegate, and this is part of the unhealth of the church, committees, in a lot of churches, and you might be in a church that's dealing with this, have somehow gained extraordinary power over the church, and nothing can be done unless they say so, or board or whatever it is. That's where you come in with the discipleship side of things, and but sometimes you don't want to make a decision or you don't want to do something because you're afraid you're going to make this group in the church mad. And so then it just sits there and nothing gets done. And you could have done it in 5 minutes. They could have done it in 5 weeks, but because there's this tension there, you just sit there and let it sit, and it just, then you become stagnant.
So let me add one more cog to this to kind of go in a different direction. What I'm learning is there's times where we need to let people flounder. We need to let them struggle so that they can learn. But what I've been, and like there's something before me even now, is if I don't step in, then this thing will fail.
Yeah.
And so I had asked myself the question, is it okay that it fails? And to that thing, I had to say, no, it's not okay that it fails. So I'm going to have to step in, but I'm only going to step into this one point. There's 3 or 4 other things that need to be addressed and dealt with, but those will be the things that we'll go back to and say, okay, let's learn here. What wasn't done? What was incomplete? How do we get better? How do we strive for excellence for the next time? But this one thing, if I do this, to me, it feels like, okay, well, even though the event wasn't everything it could have been, at least it's better. At least it's a little step forward. So, and then I go back and say, hey, this is why I did that. It's that educational process, whether it's a staff member or a church member, a committee, whatever it is, it's a letting them experience, stepping in. But I have to be careful. You guys know this. Like, I had a friend who was like, well, why don't you just step in? Well, because one, I want these people to learn. Two, we know as pastors what will be said of us if we do, right? Like we're overbearing, we're perfectionists. We don't want other people to come alongside us. And to some degree, that's leadership, right? It's taking on those things that maybe there's some truth to them, but hopefully there's not. But I've got to know when to step in and when it's okay that I don't step in. I've got to be willing to admit I don't know everything. And like you're saying, Kyle, there's 60% might take it in a whole different direction than I wouldn't have gone. But what ends up being the reality is it was successful, even though, and it survived and it was okay. And that person is now in a better place because of it.
And it's their success.
Yeah.
Like all the success doesn't have to be here for the pastor. We share those victories.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing.
This is where you're taking your pride and flipping it to humility. You're humbling yourself that it doesn't have to be done to your expectations or the way you think it should be done. If you put an end goal out there and they can get to it, so be it. But so it's you letting go of that control, but then it's also humbling because you're seeing other people reap the rewards. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be all about me. And that's servant leadership. And
well, which brings me to the last question I wanted to ask you guys is, so when we're delegating effectively, what other ways do we see that contributing to the overall health and growth of the church? Obviously, we see people's get to experience the victory, get to share in the weight of failure as well, because that can be a really healing thing. It can be a building up thing. So what are some other ways that you see delegation contributing to the health of the church?
You get more people involved beyond just being in the service on Sunday. A couple times a month, they become more engaged, which means they become more committed and take ownership of things. It also allows you to expand your ministry scope. And I don't mean that in expanding your programs, because that's dangerous in a lot of ways, but it allows the church, and I want to be careful on this, the church, not just you, to do more ministry. Because I think a lot of churches think that the pastor does the ministry, and this teaches and shows the church we all do the ministry. It's that Ephesians 4 equipping.
Take a spiritual point from Ted Lasso. There's this episode where he goes out on the field and he's like, that's all me, baby. That's all me. And he just showboats for himself. And the point he's making is it's not all you. This is a team sport. And so I think which victory sounds better? You on the field receiving all the accolade and all of your teammates feeling like they were worthless in whatever victory you have, or the entire team celebrating because there was a multitude factor to pulling this thing off, right? We love the company of it. And so, and it's not just like that we get to experience it, like it is, there's a plurality to this. We are all celebrating something together. I feel like that a party is much better, having a bunch of people getting to celebrate something together. That just sounds way more appealing to me. That's what we should go after.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, that's biblical, right? I mean, we don't see in the visions and Revelation that it's just a bunch of pastors. I mean, it's the army of the Lamb, right? It's everybody together joining in one song and of every tribe and tongue, and we need to be doing that in a micro level at each church. That it's every mini tribe and tongue within our church, all moving forward to see the kingdom work done. And it does have this multiplication factor to it when we delegate well. We are giving other people an opportunity to see their gifts at work, see their gifts used for the sake of the kingdom. And and like I already said this, but I'm honestly, as we're talking about this, I'm hearing you guys talk about it. It's one of those things where it's just such a reminder of how much I need to make this an emphasis and the ways that I struggle with it. I appreciate hearing from you guys on this because it's it is easier in the short term to say I'll just do it, but it is so much more fruitful in the long term if we're able to hand things off to see people grow.
So the three of us are at revitalizations, and the reality is they might differ a little bit, but it was either what led to the revitalization is people weren't doing anything, or a couple people were doing everything.
Right.
All of that leads to an unhealthy reality. And so
Right.
if pastors are going to try and do it all, they're going to kill themselves, and they're actually going to kill the church. Or if there's a few people who are, kind of that same mindset that the pastor has, where they're just taking it all on themselves and they're not willing to share, then they're going to find themselves isolated. And there's going to be a remnant of people who are there that are, controlling things, but they've lost everybody else. So I talked about this question in essence with my counselor yesterday, and he said, Josh, let me ask you, which is more important, the product or the process? And I didn't like this question, right? Because we do focus on the product. We focus on the end result.
Right.
What is it that we present? And he said, but the process is what's so important, because the process is bringing people along. The process is encouraging people. It's helping them understand their spiritual giftedness. It's giving them opportunities and giving them the grace to fail or to struggle. That's one of the beauties that I've seen in being able to do college ministry at First Baptist Cedar Hill, having these DBU students come in, because we've had them intern with us, and it's like, they'll ask the question, what am I supposed to do? And the question I always ask back is, what do you want to do? What do you want to experience? What do you want to see? Let's get your hands on some things so that you can see what it's like. And it's okay that you mess up. It's okay that you overstep. Like, we'll learn, we'll process through that together, because the process is really, really fun. And one more thing on that, like we sat down with a college student this last week, and she's joining the church on Sunday. And she said, hey, where can I serve? Where do you need me? And I said, let me reframe that question for you in a way that we think is really important. What has God gifted you to do, and what are you passionate about? Let's figure out those things, because that's actually going to be better for the church. I could put you somewhere, but it's not actually, it might not shape up well for the church or for you. So let's figure out what is it the best, how has God formulated you? What has he made you passionate about? Because if we can get that working for you, man, it's gonna pay dividend.
I really like that, because so y'all might be like me in this, like, y'all have servant hearts, and there is a a difficult thing about having a servant heart, is that you want to work hard in every area where there is a vacuum of need. So when I got started in ministry, I was like what you're expressing from these interns of, what can I do? And so my youth pastor would say, do this. And so I learned how to edit video. I became the video editor. I was like, what else can I do? I'm doing this. Like, okay, well, we need somebody to run lights for our services. Got it. So I learned how to run lights. From that, I learned how to run sound and the video media projection and all this stuff. And then it was like, what else can I do? Well, you can lead the small groups. So I'm leading small groups. And all of a sudden, I am a jack of all trades. And it has helped me so much in ministry. I know how to do just about anything in ministry wise. It's also hurt me in ministry, because I've felt like I don't need help. I've done it all, and I can do it all. So by somebody speaking into my life and just saying, hey, but what are you good at? I think that would have helped me direct my calling to ministry a little bit more. Instead, I've spent, gosh, how long have I been in ministry now? I don't know. I'm 20 years in ministry.
40 years.
20 plus years in ministry. I've spent thinking I can do it all. And it takes getting into this seat and realizing that I shouldn't try to do it all. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for the church. I'm still learning. I'm still apologizing to my church, apologizing to my deacons, committee leaders, and saying, sorry, guys. I had one of our worship team members called me out. He's like, stop doing this. We can handle it. I said, okay. It's a good thing. Josh, you're mentioning just the state that we find these churches in. Don't be surprised if you're a young pastor. Don't be surprised if you walk into a church that is hoping that you will do it all, that really wants you to do it all because they're tired. Don't let that surprise you. But at the same time, don't feel like that's your job. Your job is to nurse their wounds and tell them, hey, it's okay that you join in this journey and it be a thing of joy for you again.
So I add one more thing is don't feel guilty because you're letting other people take the lead or you're not at that thing. I used to feel a certain way when like the pastor wouldn't show up to my event. Well, it's not because he doesn't care about me, because the man needs a break, Right. And so I've learned that more and more in this role because, I'm doing 20 different things and you need the break and it's okay. One of the most comforting things, I was talking with the guy last night even about just some areas of leadership that he's taking on. And I said, I'm sorry. And he said, why are you apologizing? It's not your fault. Like, let us figure it out. Like, let us take the lead on it. And I was like, thank you. Like, I got to break down in that moment. But it is like, we do want to see our churches succeed. We do want to be as helpful as hopefully you do want to be as helpful as you can to that, but you can't do everything and that's okay. And it's actually healthy that you would understand that you can't do everything. Maybe there's people in the church that think that you can, and they'll come to learn you can't. But God's going to, I would assume that God's going to give you some people who are going to be really strong in areas that you are weak. And it's the greatest thing that you get to do is say, hey, run with it. Not just because I'm not good at it, but because you are a godsend, because, God paired us together as a church, right? You're a part of the whole body. You're not an extra special part of the body, even though you have to give an account for the way that you led that church. But you're one part like every other part. And that's good. It's healthy for you. It's just the role that we get to play collectively.
And what a cool opportunity as a pastor to be able to look at people, their gifts activated for the sake of the kingdom. And you say, great job, to encourage them, to be that cheerleader for them. I mean, what a blessing that we have to say, you have made our church more fruitful in ministry because you are doing what God has called you to do. Keep it up. I mean, what a more life-giving thing than just it being done how you like it.
Yeah.
It's really what it comes down to. When you weigh those two things out, I think it's pretty obvious what we ought to be doing. So, well, Bryan had to step away, so we lost him before the episode was over. He had to help his daughter with a flat tire. Maybe he should have delegated that responsibility to her.
AAA.
Delegate that. No, I'm just kidding. But we're so glad that you all could listen to this podcast. Go ahead and like and follow us on social media if you could. We are everywhere possible. I'm sure we have a MySpace, even if that's still around. Zanga page. Am I showing my age here? But Rookie Pastors Pod on all the social media platforms except for X, and or Rookie Pastors on there. But give us a follow there. Feel free to comment on any of our posts. We love to hear from you guys. And then leave us a review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it might be. Leave us a review. That's a great way to help us get this podcast in front of more people who need these encouragements. And that's just what we want to do with this. So thanks for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week, and delegate a couple things this week. That'd be good.